Are the Tennessee Titans headed for a rebuild in the 2023 offseason after offloading a ton of veterans? Bobby Wagner released by the Los Angeles Rams. Jalen Ramsey could be next. And Aaron Rodgers climbing out of his hole on the latest news and rumors on this Peacock and Williamson Friday edition. Coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on Twitter. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Matt, I live over here in California. I know you're in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area. What was this weird white stuff that was falling out of the sky yesterday in the Bay Area? That's not something you see. There's a couple of Bay Area mountaintops that have snow on them. And
wow.
Down in the valley where I am, in Tam Valley, which is, I'm just a hair north of the Golden Gate Bridge. It was actually, I saw it landing in my hands. It melted as soon as it got to the ground. Then later on with some hail, which is more common for California. But I got my raincoat on now. This is some odd weather in 2023 we're having over here. And even a little snow on the west coast of California today.
Wow, I didn't realize. And so today's chilly here. Today's in the 30s, but yesterday set a record high. It hit 70 or something here yesterday. I've pulled out my snow shovel, I think, once this whole offseason or whole winter. So I think the polar bears are losing their ice.
It's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah,
You're getting the California winter, kind of dropping into the 30s at night. But yesterday, about 10 minutes after a couple of snowflakes fell from the sky, it was bright and sunny, and you had to put a t-shirt on, and it was warm. And it's really wild weather right now as we head toward spring. You know what happens in spring, Matt?
Real quick, did your son love the snow? I mean, is that like a big deal there?
No. Well, he's been to the snow a couple times. We like to go up to Lake Tahoe. A little scared still of it, especially skiing vibes. So he doesn't like to go too fast down the hill yet, but he's definitely interested in the snow and flopping around in that.
I thought he'd get a kick out of it just falling on, looking out the window, watching it fall out of the sky.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely curious about what's happening outside and how it impacts whether he can go out and play or not. Very few play days so far in 2023.
Okay.
Especially on Saturdays. That's the rough one when it's raining on a Saturday. It's like, oh, man, this is the day we have to do whatever we want.
Come on, man. Yeah.
Stay indoors. Lots of news, lots of rumors happening around the league. I'm going to start with the Tennessee Titans, Matt.
Okay. Yeah. Big stuff.
This is, Mike Vrabel won the power struggle with John Robinson. Clearly, the A.J. Brown debacle last offseason was a big part of that. Clearly, Mike Vrabel wanted A.J. Brown around. This looks like it's headed for just a full-on rebuild, though. Am I reading this wrong with the Tennessee Titans? Because Taylor Lewan released. There
Robert
is
Woods, Zach Cunningham
released. Tannehill feels like he's got to be next. I don't know why you would pay Tannehill's salary at this point. I don't know if there's a trade market for Ryan Tannehill either at this point. And then you look at where the team is at, especially on the offensive line. Here's one from PFF that blows me away. And when you see it laid out like this. So Taylor Lewan released this week, 3-time Pro Bowler. He was an all-pro. He was the highest paid left tackle in the league in 2018. And then since then has only played, I think, half of his snaps in the last 66 games and even fewer in the last 3 years. ACL in 2020. I think limited to 5 games because of that and other knee injuries in 2021, and only started 2 games last year. So the injury bug really bit Taylor Lewan. He was just unavailable, and he was a cap casualty this offseason, and we'll see where Taylor Lewan lands. But the entire offensive line, how about this? Derrick Henry ran for over 2,000 yards in 2020. His week 1 starting offensive line in 2020 was Taylor Lewan, who was released this week. Roger Saffold at left guard. He was with the Bills and now is an unrestricted free agent into 2023. Ben Jones was the starting center. He's the only one that's still there, turning 34 this year. Nate Davis, unrestricted free agent at right guard. And then Dennis Kelly, who's the Colts backup last year and is also a free agent. So they've got an aging Ben Jones, and that's it from what used to be a really good offensive line. It just feels like they're setting themselves up to play Malik Willis and borderline tank and see where you're at in the 2024 draft. And maybe I'm reading this wrong. And Mike Vrabel's a good coach, and they still have some pieces on defense. But I don't know how you compete with this roster going into the 2023 offseason.
No, I 100% agree. And I think that's actually the right move. And you can't pay Tannehill. I think he's like a $30-some million cap hit. I mean, maybe you can get a mid-round pick out of Atlanta or Washington or a team like that and says, hey, we'll make him our stopgap starter. I still think he's a starting quarterback, though. I think he's still a better player than he gets credit for. The one name you didn't mention, Bud Dupree's as good as gone, too. I mean, he's coming a huge contract after he left the Steelers, and he's going to get cut for sure. I think you blow it up. I mean, I had heard, what about Derrick Henry to the Bills? I'm like, wow, that sounds fun. You know, I mean, do you get rid of him as well, or do you at least keep him around to make whoever's there life a little bit easier? And why I think tanking is the right move, and I rarely do, and I'm not saying try to lose games, but I think there's a strong enough culture there with Vrabel that they could withstand a bad year. You know, like I think losing is a terrible thing to preach, and you know, most teams don't recover and bounce back from it. But I think Vrabel, with his style of coaching, the money he has in the bank, so to speak, could withstand that. And if it yields you that quarterback from USC or North Carolina maybe next year, one bad year might be all it is. And I would get that O-line in shape, first and foremost.
Right. Do take your medicine now, do the work now, and maybe you have just as good of a shot because they're picking 11 this year. And It's going to be hard for them to get up and get a quarterback now. And you might have an opportunity, a better opportunity that ends up costing you less and a better team to plug a quarterback in and a better quarterback in the draft next year. So that's why with them being at 11, too many teams in front of them, I think fighting for your quarterback this offseason, unless the right guy is just there for you at 11 or very close by, pick 11, you get up, to pick 8 right in front of Carolina, maybe if that's how things go and you can get a quarterback, then it would make sense. But see what you got in Malik Willis, take your medicine. But you're right. Like tanking doesn't happen in September through December. Tanking happens right now in the spring, right?
That's a front office thing. Yeah.
Right. As winter, as the snow stops falling,
right.
The podcast and the sun comes out, this is when tanking happens. And they've got a new GM in town. I think you're right with Vrabel having sort of, money in the bank with ownership. And of course, ownership has to be involved, and that has to be part of the plan with Rand Carthon coming in. And they're like, okay, look, this is the offseason where we've got to fix this. We're going to lose a lot of veteran players. That means the W's might not start flowing immediately, but it sets us up for a better long-term vision of success.
Yeah, I mean, I think you target 5 or 6 key guys. Jeffrey Simmons, you hope it's Burks, last year's first-round pick, Byard. And these are our building blocks. Everybody else can kind of come and go, but build an O-line.
Derrick Henry, I didn't really even, for some reason, that didn't dawn on me. If you're cutting Dupree and you're cutting Tannehill and you're going to have Malik Willis, you want to help him out a little bit. But Derrick Henry behind whatever patched up offensive line they end up with, and they should probably be drafting one of those at pick 11. In a mock draft, I'm definitely drafting an offensive line at 11 rather than trading up for a quarterback for the Titans. I mean,
Me too.
Much more sense. Derrick Henry can help you, but Derrick Henry alone isn't going to do the job. Could you get something for Henry who's probably not going to be a part of that vision we just laid out in 2025?
Yeah, I often reference my son. He's 16 years old. So he asked me a bunch of questions. He's like, Henry to the Bills. I'm seeing this rumor on Insta or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I could see that. He's like, first round pick, more than that? I'm like, no. I mean, I think you get a second or a third. You get 2 good years at Derrick Henry, something like that. You got to pay him. But that's still worth it to me if I'm Tennessee. I mean, think about playing defense against Malik Willis, Derrick Henry, and that team. I mean, I would have 15 guys in the box.
Do you think he's worth what the Niners gave up for Christian McCaffrey at the deadline?
No. Just because I just think he has too much wear and tear and doesn't influence the passing game. I mean, McCaffrey's a weapon. Derrick Henry's an old school back. Yeah. I think he's a second-round pick at most, from a contender, late second.
Maybe a 2 this year, and if he stays healthy and hits a certain mark, then you get a condition maybe in the following draft or something like that.
I could buy that. And if I'm Tennessee, I'm all ears,
Oh, yeah, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, and
Yeah,
I love Derrick Henry, but I could
Get
absolutely
out while you
see that.
can.
Yeah, I don't know where that Bills rumor came from, but I could see it. But you're right.
Makes my senses, Annie.
Yeah, he doesn't influence the passing game as much, so it'd have to be the right team and the right scheme that wants to. And I feel like Derrick Henry, if you're gonna go down that road, you want to feed him. So you probably a team that feels like they have a pretty good offensive line that maybe has more of an iffy quarterback. So I don't even know if the Bills is the right team for Derrick Henry.
How about Baltimore?
Oh, yeah. And they might end up with extra picks, right?
Right.
Well, and in our news and rumors here, we're going through on today's podcast, there's a lot of talk about the Atlanta Falcons, which keep coming up in the conversation with Lamar Jackson. So let's get into that next. Lamar Jackson, Baltimore, Atlanta, a potential home for Derrick Henry, maybe. And Aaron Rodgers crawling out of his darkness hole, and some interesting quotes anonymously coming out of Green Bay next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson on the Locked On Podcast Network is presented by our very good friends at Built Bar. If you're trying to find a low sugar, low calorie snack that is high in protein, and you should be, then Built Bar is something that you've got to try. Built Bar is definitely part of my diet. I love that I can reach for a snack and feel good about it because I'm getting that protein. I'm trying to hit a certain amount of protein in my diet every day. I'm down about 5 pounds since the new year, might be even closer to 10 pounds at this point. Been working out a lot, getting rid of the bad snacks and eating snacks that are low in sugar, that are high in protein, that are low in calories. And you feel good about it because not only do they taste good, but they're actually healthy for you. And I don't know how they do it, but Built Bar is putting together some amazing flavors. You know, peanut butter is still my favorite, but the newest at Built.com, they have animal cookie flavor Built Bars.
Whoa.
And they have maple donut puff. So, like, if you're a donut fiend, go to Built Bar, get a box of the maple donut puffs Built Bars, and get rid of all, because donuts is probably the worst thing you could possibly be eating with the sugar and it's fried dough. It's like, it's the worst of everything. So get that donut flavor, but with protein and lower sugar. Most Built Bars, by the way, covered in 100% real chocolate, only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And not only can you find them at Built.com, you can find them on store shelf now as well, like at your local Walmart and Sam's Club. They've got 4 boxes at the pharmacy section of Walmart, and in Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box of hit flavors like brownie batter and churro, and thank us later. And of course, you can find all the flavors and varieties at Built.com. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen. Make sure you are subscribed up to the brand new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel. Trying to grow that new channel. We're not on the Locked On NFL channel any longer. Some of the shows still up there, but pretty soon they're all going to be just exclusively on. Doesn't change anything for your audio pods if you listen to us every morning driving to work or every afternoon driving home from work. But if you watch us on YouTube, and go check us out on YouTube if you don't. We're not just live shows. Get some chats going as well. Brand new YouTube channel, Peacock and Williamson. Subscribe, hit the button, hit the thumbs, and all those things. Aaron Rodgers is no longer in his darkness retreat. There's been some articles showing what it looks like, where it was located, and it was pretty cushy. You know, it's kind of
didn't sound so bad.
Yeah, it looks like it's from the Shire, a little bit of a hobbit hole where there's a door above ground and some of it's below ground, but it's very cushy. It looks more like a yoga retreat than a darkness retreat. And I think the darkness is more about not being connected to technology than actually how dark it is. And you got some candles and you take a little bath and you got a bed and you got a yoga mat. And it's more of a relaxation treat. It's more of a unconnect to society retreat, right? And so we'll see how Aaron Rodgers thinks about his football life now this offseason. We haven't gotten any quotes from him yet, but very interesting quotes anonymously, and I've seen this in multiple places where folks inside the organization in Green Bay were asked about Aaron Rodgers and what they thought about Aaron Rodgers coming out of his retreat and what they expected to hear from Aaron Rodgers. And it's pretty funny that the responses were basically, quote, who cares?
So it's basically what it was.
If you believe these reports coming out of Green Bay, sounds like they're pretty darn done with Aaron Rodgers and would prefer a trade or a retirement, and that number 12 might not be in Green Bay this year, no matter how Aaron Rodgers feels about things. And so, yeah, a cut, is that even possible too here?
Wow.
Is it possible that Rodgers says, I want to come back, I want to play in Green Bay, I want to finish my career, and Green Bay says, nah, not really.
We're good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's more and more, it's sounding like a divorce between the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers.
I'm sure he's high maintenance. Yeah, I mean, no question. And the older he gets, the less he cares about everybody else, or more, maybe the more he cares about what everyone else thinks. And so it might be time to. I've seen enough of Aaron. You can be on your way. You probably only have a year or two left. But I also think that's a ringing endorsement for Jordan Love. I mean, we saw one game and we were like, oh, he played pretty well. But if you watch him every day in practice, the players know, is this guy legit or not? It's hard to go to the veterans and be like, we're just going to move on for Aaron and hand it to this guy who looks terrible in practice for 4 years or whatever. So maybe Love's the long-term answer. I'm starting to buy a little Jordan Love stock, I think.
And that makes it a lot easier for your Green Bay to say, who cares, right? Because you got a Hall of Fame quarterback. If you have no other options at quarterback, you might say, let's talk about this.
Right.
Let's figure this out. But they've been through this so many off seasons. I think, the front office in Green Bay, and I think the fans alike, because, there's young fans that have only known Aaron Rodgers and love Aaron Rodgers. And I'm sure a lot of fans don't want to see him go as a Hall of Fame quarterback. It's hard to find, even though if you're a Packers fan, you've had a Hall of Fame quarterback since 1992 or whatever. But the fans feel like they're ready to move on. Like, it's exhausting. It's like, we're not going to go through another offseason of this. So,
and the older fans did this with Favre, and that had to be exhausting too.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, especially those fans that have been through the Brett Favre era of
bonkers.
The NFL was the worst. And it made me, it really, to be honest with you, it kind of led to the path that I'm on right now. And I've got an independent spirit. And I was like, ESPN, I can't turn you on TV anymore if you're going to talk about Brett Favre. I can't do it.
Yeah, right.
And so started to find independent sources and other places on the internet to find stuff and talk about these things. And I think it's one of the downfalls of big national networks is they want to they just want to beat you over the head with the one biggest story. And so that's why people come here to get a little different look at things sometimes. And of course, we're talking about the biggest stories and we do hit them, but we're not going to beat you over the head with them. And I feel like the Packers organization and maybe Packers fans are feeling beat over the head by this whole thing. And which makes me feel like it's much, much more likely than ever before that Aaron Rodgers will be moving on from the Green Bay Packers, whether it's retirement or trade.
It's pretty funny you brought that up because I kind of put this memory somewhere in a dark place so I didn't have to think about it anymore.
Darkness retreat in your mind.
Exactly. That whole Favre saga, I was working for ESPN.
Yes.
I mean, yes. I was on ESPN.com and doing podcasts.
How many times were you mandated to write a story about Brett Favre?
Right. I mean, we were like the only daily football podcast out there at the time. What do we think about Favre? Every day you'd have to bring up Favre. An hour-long podcast, Football Today, Favre, then Vikings and Jets and all that. Like, oh, enough. Just retire or go in a dark place.
Yes.
Last note, though, on the Packers. I do think if deep down they thought they were still a contender, the team of 2 years ago, the 13-win team, maybe they wouldn't say who cares, But, I mean, after trading Adams, you have a young defense. I think you look at things, maybe you move on from a Bakhtiari and say it's youth movement time. Not to the Titan level, but it's youth movement time.
Absolutely. By the way, we talked about the Titans, Packers, another team. That mid-first round pick might be an offensive lineman.
Absolutely.
There's not many teams in the NFL right now that don't need an offensive lineman. And It's pretty amazing the more I go through the offseason and look at all the teams and start to project things out. There's not a single team that doesn't need a pretty high-level offensive lineman, not just an offensive lineman.
And I was looking at the free agent class. It's bad as always. I mean, shopping for O-linemen, it's just a terrible aisle in the grocery store to be in.
Oh, really good, healthy offensive linemen don't hit the free agent market. Almost less than quarterbacks these days.
Right. I mean, there's a massive I say this all the time. That one of the biggest problems that the league never talks about is the blockers are so inferior to the people they're trying to block at the line of scrimmage right now. And do yourself a favor and just kind of look at the combine. And you'll notice the O-linemen have come a long way. There's not a lot of fat guys anymore, and they're better athletes than they've ever been. But then the D-line drills start, and you're like, whoa. These guys are velociraptors with, unbelievable wingspan and tiny waists. Like, how's anybody block those guys?
Yeah, where do these guys come from?
Right.
Every year there's more and more of them.
So many this year, too.
If you're an NFL team and you're willing to trade away a starting offensive lineman or I think a starting wide receiver as well is starting to be especially with this free agent class and maybe the draft class not being as great at wide receiver. There's some speed, but there's not as many studs as there's been in recent drafts at wide receiver. You could probably make a nice chunk of draft picks if you're willing to trade a starting offensive lineman or a starting wide receiver, especially one that's not making absurd money.
I mean, we certainly saw it a year ago with Adams and Tyreek. I mean, those guys got hauls, and they're on the back nine of their career. They're not shot or anything, but they're not A.J. Brown's age. You know what I mean? They're not first contract guys. And I don't think anybody has the stones to say, I'm going to trade Walter Jones or Jonathan Ogden. You know what I mean? But if you did, like Laramie Tunsil, I guess could be a guy. I mean, he's gotten traded. Yes. Somebody like that. Like, I mean, 2 firsts? I mean, maybe.
Yeah, he's another one because he's due a new contract at some point soon as well and could be on the move from the Houston Texans this offseason, no doubt.
Orlando Brown's the best example. Like, I think he is as average as a day is long. He's just huge. He's an average starting left tackle, and he's either going to get second franchised or a massive payday, and he's just okay.
Right, and there's offensive tackles. Like, I looked at PFF's list of the best free agents in the entire league this year. And there's names like Mike McGlinchey in the top 10. And 49ers fans are trying to run him out of town and talking about, hey, we got to get better at right tackle. He's going to get insane money on the free agent market. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I have people around here. Steelers should sign Isaiah Wynn. I'm like, yeah, he's not. And he wasn't very good last year. I'm like, he's going to make a fortune. And he's an average dude or a below average dude. I mean, great time to be an O lineman. There's a shortage to know it.
Caleb McGarry from the Atlanta Falcons. He's had one good year. He was thought of as a late first round bust for a while, and then had a nice year last year.
Now he's 26 or 27. He's going to make a fortune. I would franchise him.
Money.
Yeah,
it's pretty unbelievable. All right, next. Why so much smoke with the Atlanta Falcons and Lamar Jackson and some of the latest news and rumors around the NFL? Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. And now you can compete with some of the other Locked On listeners and maybe some hosts as well. All in this challenging and realistic game world, Ultimate Football GM, completely free and playable offline, play on the go, play as you want to. If you've ever dreamed of being an NFL GM, running your football franchise from top to bottom, now is your turn to compete. You get to manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through seasons, lead your team to glory, build a dynasty, hire and fire the right coaches, trade for and trade away players, navigate your franchise through free agency and the draft. And we've created a Locked On League for you to compete against Locked On fans all over the world. And the Ultimate Football GM makes it really easy. So all you do is you download the app and choose the Locked On League, one word, all caps, Locked On League in the app to join and create a football dynasty and compete with some other Locked On listeners around the world. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Matt, why are the Atlanta Falcons seemingly the hot team, the team that keeps getting brought up when it comes to Lamar Jackson? Are they a quarterback away? Are they a team that should be spending 3 first-round picks on a quarterback after they drafted the third round quarterback last year? Is that what's going to fix the Atlanta Falcons here? Why is that the team? Is that because Lamar might want to be there? Is that because they're super interested? It's just weird to me that the Falcons are the team, because when I look at all the teams in the NFL, they don't jump out.
Yeah. I mean, not a great roster. I mean, no, there's no way around it. I mean, I thought going into last year, them in Houston might have the worst rosters in the league. And I think they're well coached and they got more out of the limited talent than most coaches might have done, mostly from running the football with great volume. I don't know. I think I would do another year of franchising McGarry, draft defense like crazy, give Ritter a sink or swim season, and see what you got with the guy. I'm kind of a Ritter fan. I thought he was more of an early second than a third type prospect. But Lamar's a franchise-changing guy, and you don't have a lot of brand name dudes. I mean, the Falcons, I'm sure, aren't the hottest ticket in Atlanta. And think about that run game, though, with that quarterback. I mean, I would just play the exact same system, run the ball with great volume, Algier, Cordarrelle, and their style of running. But you throw in the quarterback mix and a healthy Pitts in London. Hopefully they don't cost you those guys. You could have a heck of an offense.
Coach up the defense, add all the rest of the picks that you have on the defensive side of the ball and hope that, I mean,
South is very winnable.
I could see that's very true.
Right.
You could go buy a division title in Lamar Jackson potentially if
it's probably enough
for you.
I mean, I don't know if it's enough to knock off the Chiefs and Eagles and those teams, but I mean, winning the division would be pretty good for morale in Atlanta, considering where they've been since their Super Bowl appearance.
Absolutely. And Arthur Blank doesn't seem like the kind of owner that's that would shy away from such a move either.
Right. I think you're right about that. Yeah. So that's an interesting landing spot for me.
And from Baltimore's side, every report is just that they're so far apart, and that the Browns basically screwed this up for not only the Ravens, but for a lot of teams. And they're $100 million apart in the guaranteed portion of the contract. And Lamar Jackson wants as many or more guarantees as Deshaun Watson got. And he's, he deserves to ask that. And so now he's got a comp to ask it. And the Ravens are like, that's it. That's not our comp. That's not happening. That is, that is fairy tale land.
Pretend that doesn't exist, Lamar.
Right. And here's for the Ravens, it's like the Browns screwed up. Why would we screw up purposely?
Sure.
Doing something that it doesn't make sense for an NFL franchise. And so that's what's really thrown a wrench into this whole thing. And what I find odd, and it was the same way with the Deshaun Watson thing, and for Lamar Jackson, he can find more guaranteed money from a have-not, from a team that needs a quarterback. And it's wild that he's the same quarterback and he has the same value to the Ravens or to another team.
Mm-hmm.
But to the team that has the quarterback, they don't have the urgency. But a team that doesn't have a quarterback and needs one, they have more urgency and are more willing to overpay and do a bad contract to get a quarterback, even though the team that won't have the quarterback then won't have the quarterback anymore. It's just fascinating what the psychology is from a team that is a have or have not when it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL.
100%. And you've said this many times, and I like to repeat it, that in terms of the negotiations, I 100% understand both sides. There's no bad guy. There's none of that.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, we could come up with 5 teams. I like your Giants suggestion. Nobody talks about the Giants. A lot of people have been talking about Carolina or Atlanta. I mean, what about Indy? I mean, there's a lot of teams that could use Lamar Jackson, which would make perfect sense in the world. Maybe to me, the most fascinating thing, though, is what style or what quarterback would the Ravens get post Lamar? Would it be a Derek Carr? Would it be somebody totally different? Would they draft Anthony Richardson and run the same type of offense? I wonder what quarterback Harbaugh wants if he can handpick them.
If we're putting news and rumors together, Matt, what if the most recent reports that the Bears are considering maybe Bryce Young at quarterback and trading Justin Fields? What if whichever team doesn't have Lamar, whether it's the Falcons or the Ravens, trading
Fields is from Atlanta, I think,
and sending a pick to Chicago for Justin Fields? Yeah, he's a Georgia kid.
I'm not saying I'd rather have Fields than Lamar. Lamar's a much better player. He's a great player. But Fields would be a lot cheaper. And if I'm running a Ravens or Falcons offense with Fields, oh, baby. I mean, that is a hard one to deal with.
Or what are the Giants? What about the Giants?
That wouldn't be bad either.
Basically the same scheme they did. Because Daniel Jones, when you really look at the numbers, and actually Warren Sharp did a really good breakdown yesterday about looking at the numbers and where Daniel Jones improved from previous years. And he did not improve at all as a passer between the 20s and on third downs in the
hard stuff.
He was just better as a runner and better in the red zone. And they got to the red zone more often because he was a better runner and more well-coached. So essentially Daniel Jones is the same guy last year that he was before. He was used different, and you can point to the coaching staff, which in my mind says, well, then it's clearly not the quarterback's fault. It's the coach's fault. So let the coach somebody else and make them better as well. Right. And so I could absolutely see someone like, and I thought, to be honest with you, I thought the Chicago Bears should have hired Brian Dable. I thought he was the perfect guy for Justin Fields and that. What about Fields to the New York Giants if we're going to spin the quarterback carousel a little bit harder this offseason?
I like it. I might even throw your boy Trey Lance in this equation too. I mean, and so last note on Jones. I'm with you. I would not give him the money. More and more, I think, let him walk, or just, here's one offer, and it's the best we're going to do, Daniel, sign it or not. But one thing in his defense, I think we have to bring up, though, is he might have been throwing to the worst wide receivers in the league last year. I mean, it was a pretty bad group. I mean,
it was either him or Fields, right?
Right. So
it probably was Daniel Jones. At least Fields had
Mooney for a while.
Yeah, he had Mooney for a while, and then Claypool barely played. Claypool trade was bad, but I think the Claypool trade will look better next year when he gets a full off season and has starts the season healthy with an off season. It'll look a little bit better.
He'll never be worth the 32nd overall pick, but he's not a bad player.
He's a starting caliber wide receiver.
Starting wide receiver. Him and Mooney and Kmet would be a decent trio.
And then maybe even you throw in
then you throw
DeAndre Hopkins in
there. Right.
Now you're starting to cook and give him some weapons over there in Chicago. Fascinating stuff. It's a wild world we live in the off season, especially when you allow minds to run wild and you allow rumors to run wild and anonymous quotes. It's anonymous quote season, by the way, which means it's also lying season. I'm still not buying the Bears report that they're interested in trading Fields and drafting Bryce Young. I'm not buying that because we already knew that report was going to come out, whether it was true or not. So to me, it's smoke. To me, it's lying season, and you got to start really sort of navigating the news and rumors you hear in the NFL, because some are clearly planted and some might have some reality to them, and some might be a little bit of both.
Yep. And funny, because right before we hit record, I said, we recorded that one about Fields yesterday. I'm starting to think there's a better chance he gets traded. And then you go, Matt, it's lying season. I'm like, oh, it is lying season. I forgot. I bite every year. I mean, it fooled me once, but I've only been doing this for 50 years or something. And every year I'm like, oh yeah, it's lying season. And you said something like, that's the rumor. They have to play it. I'm like,
but it's also the genius of lying season is once it's late into lying season, you could tell the truth and everyone thinks it's a lie.
Exactly. I know that you know that I know.
Absolutely. You know what's coming up next week, Matt?
What's that?
The annual Williamson draft ditties. A draft note on every single team in the NFL. We'll start with the AFC on Monday. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Subscribe to the new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel. Talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.